Imagine this. A dusty wooden chest, locked for centuries, discovered in the forgotten corner of an old monastery library. Inside it, a diary, dated 1591, filled with strange sketches, cryptic predictions, and descriptions of creatures no one had ever recorded. The moment historians saw it, they were stunned. It felt too detailed, too dramatic, too impossible. And so, almost immediately, the so-called 1591 diary was declared a hoax. Not by a few skeptics, by nearly everyone. For over 100 years, it became a joke in academic circles, a favorite example of how far people would go to fake history. But here's the part nobody expected. The controversy never died. No matter how many experts dismissed it, the diary refused to fade away. There was something about it, something unsettlingly precise, something that felt real. And that's where this story begins. For a whole century, people called it a clever forgery. Why? First, the diary's writing style felt suspiciously modern. It was as if the writer had seen the future and used language ahead of his time. Then there were the illustrations, detailed sketches of unknown animals and symbols that didn't match any known 16th century archive. And of course, the biggest red flag, the diary described historical events that didn't line up with what textbooks said. Battles nobody recorded, rituals no historian had ever heard of, villages that seemed to vanish from existence without leaving a trace. It was simply too good to be true, and in history, too good usually means fake. So for decades, scholars dismissed it. Museums refused to display it. Universities pushed it aside. Even conspiracy enthusiasts couldn't agree on it. Some said it was a Victorian-era prank. Others believed it was the work of a genius forger. A few insisted it was real and that the world simply wasn't ready to accept what was inside. But behind all the skepticism, a quiet question kept whispering, what if, just maybe, everyone was wrong? Because here's something nobody expected. In 2025, the diary resurfaced. And this time, it wasn't handled by skeptics, hobbyists, or rumor hunters. It fell into the hands of scientists, people who had access to technology that didn't exist 20, 50, or 100 years ago. Tools that could peer into ink molecules, date fibers with insane precision, and even detect microscratches left by 16th century quill pens. And the moment these scientists started analyzing the diary, everything changed. For years, people assumed the hoax theory would finally be proven once and for all. They thought the tests would expose modern pigments, new paper, fake binding, or intentional aging. But instead, the opposite happened. Bit by bit, test after test, the diary passed every examination. And slowly, terrifyingly, the story that had been dismissed for a century started to look authentic. This wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was a time capsule from the late 1500s. A whisper from a world we thought we understood. A message from someone long dead, who somehow recorded things centuries ahead of their time. The shock waves were immediate. Historians who once mocked it went silent. Institutions that ignored it scrambled to get access. Suddenly, the biggest question wasn't, is it real? But rather, if it is real, what does it mean? Because this diary doesn't just offer details about history, it rewrites it. And tonight, as we start this 5-part journey, you're going to see exactly why the world is now obsessed with this mysterious journal. This is more than archaeology, more than ancient writing, more than dusty pages. This is a story that forces us to question everything we know about the past, and possibly everything we believe about ourselves. Welcome to the mystery of the 1591 diary. For over a century, it was labeled a fraud. But as you're about to discover, the truth is far stranger than the hoax ever was. When the diary finally reached the 2025 research team, nobody expected anything groundbreaking. Most of the scientists walking into the lab believed they were about to confirm what had been assumed for decades. Clever forgery, end of story. But something happened the moment they opened the diary under controlled laboratory lights. The paper didn't look modern. The ink didn't react like synthetic compounds. The fibers didn't behave the way machine-made paper does. The first test, carbon dating, was supposed to close the case. They extracted microscopic fibers from the diary pages and analyzed the carbon isotope ratio. Normally, forgeries show irregularities because their materials come from mixed sources or modern environments. But in this case, the results were crystal clear. The paper originated between 1580 and 1600. Exactly the right time frame. Next came ink analysis. Using Raman spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence, the team examined the pigment composition. Modern inks leave chemical signatures, synthetics, additives, stabilizers. Medieval inks have distinct iron gall profiles. Once again, the diary matched perfectly with late 16th century ink recipes. Even the chemical decay patterns lined up with centuries of natural aging. But the real shock came with handwriting forensics. Experts compared the writing style with letters, court documents, and personal notes from the 1590s. The strokes, pressure patterns, and quill marks were identical to what you'd expect from that era. No modern person could fake the microscopic scratch patterns left by a 16th century feather quill tip. It would be like trying to imitate snowflakes, impossible to replicate naturally. At this point, the team was stunned. But they weren't done. Using hyperspectral imaging, they scanned every page. This revealed hidden notes, faint symbols, erased words, and layering of ink invisible to the naked eye. Everything matched authentic writing habits, scribbles, corrections, pressure differences. A forger wouldn't have even known these microscopic details existed. Then came fiber analysis of the binding threads. The strings used to stitch the diary were made from 16th century hemp fibers with bacteria patterns only found in plants from that era. Modern bacteria differ. Modern farming differs. But this was pure, untouched 1591. By the time the testing ended, the entire scientific team was in disbelief. Every single method, chemical, physical, historical, forensic, pointed to the same conclusion: the diary was real. Completely, undeniably, scientifically real. And the world changed overnight. News broke immediately. Smithsonian historians called it the most important authentication of the decade. Cambridge released a formal statement confirming the tests. Even the Vatican expressed interest, hinting that similar ancient writings existed in their restricted archives. But beyond the official announcements, there was a deeper reaction: fear. Because now that the diary was proven authentic, one terrifying question emerged. If the diary is real, then everything inside it is real too. And that's where the story becomes truly bizarre. Because the diary doesn't just record history. It records events that shouldn't exist. Creatures humans never documented. Rituals erased from memory. Predictions that came true centuries after they were written. The breakthrough wasn't just scientific. It was a door, one that had been locked for over 400 years. And now, in 2025, that door was finally open. Imagine flipping through a 400-year-old diary expecting old maps, trade notes, maybe farming records, only to find drawings of winged beasts, descriptions of glowing symbols, and predictions about natural disasters that happened long after the writer died. That's exactly what researchers found inside the 1591 diary. The entries are unlike anything else from the period. The writer, whose identity remains unclear, documented encounters with strange creatures that don't appear in any known European or indigenous records. One sketch shows a creature with elongated limbs, huge reflective eyes, and markings on its skin similar to tribal patterns from regions the writer never visited. Another entry describes a night visitor, a being that stood taller than any man, with a voice that sounded like rustling leaves in a storm. Then there are the prophecies, written in cryptic language, almost poetic. One passage describes a massive fire that would sweep through the land across the ocean, eerily similar to the Great Chicago Fire. Another mentions a falling star that would bring iron rain, a description that aligns disturbingly well with the 1908 Tunguska explosion. These weren't vague predictions. They were detailed, timed, and shockingly accurate. But what truly puzzled historians were the cultural references. The diary mentions rituals from villages that supposedly didn't exist. ceremonies involving symbols identical to patterns only rediscovered in archaeological digs from the last 20 years. The writer describes a coastal settlement where people worship the tide as a living deity, a community that modern researchers now believe did exist but left behind no written records. The diary also contains descriptions of unknown diseases, medicinal practices, and astronomical observations far too advanced for a 16th century villager. One sketch shows a star alignment that perfectly matches an event only verified by NASA in recent decades. For centuries, this bizarre content is exactly why people assumed it was fake. But with the authentication complete, the world now faces an even stranger conclusion. If the diary is authentic, then so is the bizarre world it describes. The entries feel alive. You can sense the writer's fear, curiosity, and awe. He wasn't just recording events. He was documenting something he himself didn't understand. Something he believed would matter centuries later. And maybe he was right. When the research team created mocked-up illustrations based on the diary sketches, the public reaction was explosive. People were shocked by how detailed and how unsettling these depictions were. Social media exploded with theories. Was the writer seeing mythological creatures, travelers from distant lands, or something far beyond human understanding? Some historians now believe the diary might be the missing link connecting local folklore, unexplained archaeological artifacts, and mysterious events across Europe. Others think it could be a first-hand account of encounters we still don't fully understand today. What's undeniable is this: the diary isn't just weird. It expands the boundaries of what we thought was possible in 1591. And it forces us to question how much of history has been erased, forgotten, or misunderstood. Once the diary's authenticity was confirmed, the academic world went into shock. Suddenly, everything historians believed about the late 1500s was up for debate. Entire university departments began reassessing old theories. Archaeologists revisited sites they thought were fully understood. Even national archives began searching for overlooked records that might connect to the diary's strange content. For centuries, history has been built on what we can verify through documents, artifacts, and recorded accounts. But this diary introduces events that were never recorded anywhere else. And that tells us something unsettling. Huge portions of history may have simply vanished. The diary challenges our timeline. It describes a coastal expedition that predates known European maps by decades. It records astronomical knowledge that suggests early scientists were far more advanced than previously believed. It includes medicinal recipes using plants only documented in the 1700s. How did a man in 1591 know these things? The diary also reveals cultural connections historians never documented. Certain rituals described in the entries match recent discoveries in Scandinavian burial sites. Symbols drawn in the margins match rock carvings found in northern France. One entry describes a traveling merchant who carried tales from the dark mountains beyond the glacier, a place assumed to be mythical until researchers discovered matching artifacts in Iceland. If these connections are real, our entire understanding of 16th century cultural exchange must be rewritten. The diary also forces us to rethink myth. Creatures once considered pure folklore might have been based on real sightings, misunderstood, exaggerated, or lost through time. Not everything in the diary can be taken as literal truth, but the consistency of the descriptions suggests the writer wasn't inventing stories. He was reporting what he genuinely witnessed. But here's the most profound impact. The diary suggests that certain events were intentionally hidden or erased. One entry describes a village wiped out, not by war nor sickness, but by fear itself. No record of this place exists. No map, no mention, nothing. Yet the details match traces of ancient settlement recently found beneath layers of forest soil. Why was this community erased from memory? Some historians now believe political or religious powers may have suppressed certain stories. Others think the events were simply too strange for people of the time to understand, and so they were never recorded, left to fade away. Now, as the diary resurfaces, it reopens these buried mysteries. Universities are forming research teams dedicated to decoding the entries. Archaeologists are planning expeditions based on the diary's geographic clues. Linguists are studying the writer's coded notes in the margins. Even governments are quietly funding research, hoping the diary may reveal insights into forgotten traditions, lost settlements, or early scientific knowledge. The 1591 diary isn't just a new historical artifact. It's a key, and it unlocks a version of history we never knew existed. Now that you've heard the story, from the diary's century-long dismissal to its shocking authentication, to the bizarre entries that challenge everything we know, there's one final piece of this mystery left. Because the truth is, discoveries like this don't end when scientists finish their tests or when museums release their statements. They evolve. They grow. And sometimes, the missing answers come not from experts in a lab, but from curious minds across the world, people who see patterns others overlook. Every symbol in the diary, every creature sketch, every cryptic prophecy might mean something we haven't decoded yet. Maybe you recognize a pattern from mythology. Maybe you've seen similar markings in unrelated cultures. Maybe you know of a legend passed down in your family that mirrors what the diary describes. This mystery is bigger than any one institution, and the conversation is just beginning. So here's your call to action. Drop your theories, interpretations, and insights in the comments. Whether you think the writer witnessed unknown tribes, ancient rituals, proto-scientific observations, or something far stranger, I want to hear it. No idea is too wild. No interpretation is too small. Because this diary has already proven one thing: history is full of surprises. And this is only the start. In upcoming videos, we'll dive deeper into individual diary entries. We'll explore the creatures in detail, decode the symbols, break down the prophecies, and follow the geographic clues across Europe. We'll also look into the identity of the mysterious writer, who he was, what he believed, and why he seemed to understand things far beyond his era. The diary is more than a historical document. It's a reminder that our world is bigger, stranger, and more mysterious than we often assume. And now that it has resurfaced, we have the rare chance to rewrite history together. So stay curious, stay engaged, and join the investigation. Because who knows? Maybe the key to solving the next part of this mystery is sitting in your hands right now, waiting to be discovered.